fellow storytellers. This is Mark Graham with the Source of Story YouTube channel and Runes for Writers. Today, in this video, we are going to look at the first rune, which is Fehu. Now, Fehu literally means cattle, and its general interpretation is wealth. Among the ancient Norse, one's wealth was dictated or represented by the amount of cattle that they had. Interesting thing, and interesting interpretation. The cattle on the hoof, frankly, were not that valuable. Dairy was not widespread at the time. It was just coming into use as a food source. As you know, even today, many people have difficulty processing, metabolizing, digesting dairy products. And this, we can imagine, was even worse in ancient times when humans first began consuming bovine dairy products. So even if you had milk cows, their value was somewhat limited from a nourishment standpoint. The true value was in their meat, in their leather, in their bones, the sinew, things that you could only get after you had slaughtered the cow. So Fehu, as opposed to, it can mean a direct measurement of wealth or money. But I like to look at it as unmanifest potential. The cow, even money, represents a future promise. Money in and of itself does nothing for you unless you spend it to buy food, shelter, clothing, goods and services, things of that nature. Money in and of itself is paper and cheap metal. So that's what we look at when we look at Fehu. A way to remember this is, one, the shape of the rune. You can imagine a cow with its horns upraised into the air. The name Fehu is directly related to our English word fee, the fee that you pay for goods and services. So this is Fehu. And when you see this rune in a rune casting, you can generally take the interpretation of wealth, of potential. It could also be seen as support, as allies, as encouragement, empowerment to take a certain course of action. It can stand directly for money. It can stand for tools, material resources, even emotional support, that sort of encouragement and support. If it's reversed, we take the opposite. Reverse means it's upside down in the rune casting, it's pointing downward. And in this case, it means a lack of those things, or at least a perceived lack of those things on the part of the character. It may suggest a need or a craving for money in and of itself for its own sake. It may suggest a lack of it, poverty, monetary loss, things of that nature. It could also mean the absence of support or encouragement from one's family, one's peer group, and so forth, the tribe. So that is Fehu, upright or reversed, and this is the first rune of the first 8. The next rune we want to look at is Uruz, or Uruz. This literally means the oryx, and if you look at it, the oryx was a European bison, which was huge, larger perhaps even than the American bison. And where Fehu means cattle, Uruz, or the bison, is that even lighter. Some reports of the of bison carcasses or fossilized remains that have come down to us suggest they may have been 7 feet tall at the shoulders, with a 7 or 8 foot horn span. So these were massive creatures, and they were terrifying. They were very territorial. If you came in, they were not docile like their domesticated offspring. So many times for a hunter, a young man coming into his initiation, his rite of passage into manhood and into the warrior class, his task would be to hunt down and kill one of these massive beasts. And that gives us the meaning of Uruz, or the interpretation of it. So similarly to Fehu, to the cattle, it suggests potential, but this is potential that is about to happen. It is right on the cusp of potential energy turning into kinetic energy. We can see in the shape of this rune, you can almost imagine this huge creature with its horns lowered, getting ready to charge, and that is Uruz. It is that potential that is right on the cusp of moving into reality. So when we see this in a rune casting, we can take this a number of ways. Now, one general interpretation is power, potency, strength, virility, things of that nature. This can be procreative virility. It can be dominance. It can be things of that nature. That is one interpretation. Another interpretation, depending on the setting, is that choice or that desire that is about to turn into action. In the case of the oryx, this could be that desire to protect its territory is about to come into action of charging down that young warrior or wannabe warrior and turning him into dust. It can be that innate sexual drive, that drive to procreate in the oryx as it is about to chase down its mate. So those are some general interpretations of that. Reversed, it's the opposite. It could be impotence, either powerlessness or physical sexual impotence. It could be a lack of desire, indecisiveness. If we think of this as potential about to become kinetic energy, it's either a block of that transfer or simply the individual, the character, the situation lacks the power to turn that potential into kinetic drive. And that can either be through a lack of agency, or it can simply be that there's not enough certainty, not enough willpower behind this event to bring it into being. So that is a short description of the second rune of the first 8, Uruz. The next rune we want to talk about is Thurisaz, and this is the, sometimes also called thorn. This is the aspirated TH sound. There's no vocalization behind it. It's that TH sound that is almost a hiss or a whisper that you hear in Thor or thunder. And in the ancient Norse, it was a bit of a sharper sound. It's more of a Thor. Not quite a T sound, but a bit harder than that TH sound typically sounds like to us. And the literal meaning of this word, Thurisaz, is giant. The Thurs beings. These are variously interpreted as ogres, as Thurses, as Ettins or Jotuns. These are the dwellers in Jotunheim, in Giant Home. Now, these were not always considered monsters. Several of the deities fell in love and were struck speechless and dumbfounded by the beauty of certain giants, giantesses. So they're not always cruel, mean, vicious creatures, mindless creatures. They are quite literally forces of nature. We think of the giants in certain of the myths, with Thor in particular, who was famed for his giant hunting prowess. That various challenges, we see giants representing time, old age, fire, the tides, gravity, even fate. The Norns, or the Weirds, the 3 Weirds, the Norse version of the Fates, were giantesses. So we see these really as forces of nature. The reason Thor is always in the east fighting them, combating them, is he is standing between humanity and the uncontrolled expansion of these forces of nature. If gravity is not countered, we're flattened. If old age is not countered, we die very young, but looking quite old. If the winds are not countered, they flatten the crops. You see where this is going. These are important forces. They're necessary for life, for humanity to exist, but unchecked and unbounded, they will destroy us. And that is where Thor comes in as that balance. And so when we see this rune, we see that as balance, as boundaries, as individuality. So when Thurisaz is upright, it means that boundaries are respected, that a person's sense of individuality, of their personal boundaries are respected and secure. When we see this rune reversed, the opposite is true. This means that a person's boundaries are not being respected either by themselves or others or everyone. This can be seen in potentially a codependent relationship. It can be seen as outright abuse. That the ultimate negation of boundaries is when you physically or verbally abuse another person. That is the ultimate disrespect of that person's boundaries. It could also mean that the character is not respecting boundaries. So these are things to think about and to take into consideration. Again, none of these interpretations is cut and dried. If it were simply a matter of throwing the cards down and writing down your story, I would be charging a lot more for this system. But the power and the agency of you as the storyteller still exists and dominates in how specifically each rune is interpreted, given its position in the layout, in its relation to your story. As we get into more complicated rune castings, even in the 9 worlds rune casting, and as we expand upon that, the location of the rune within the layout, the relation of the rune to that position. Is it natural in that position? Is it contrary? Things of that nature will come into play as well. So in these descriptions, I do just want to give you a generality, a general description of the runes, and just a quick way to understand them, to begin learning them and memorizing them so that you're not always referring to your reference guides. And just to really get you thinking, we're just laying a groundwork, and where you take it from there is entirely up to you and unbounded. So this is Thurisaz, the rune of boundaries. The next rune we want to talk about is Ansuz. And Ansuz literally means a deity. The Os were the early names of what we now call the Aesir, or the gods of Asgard. Asgard itself was Osgard, the fortress of the Os, of the Aesir, the deities. So, in various interpretations as the Germanic languages developed, another variant on Ansuz may mean mouth, it may mean river, but the general interpretation of this rune is divine communication or inspiration, if you will. We can see in the rune, I kind of picture this as Odin, who is the chief deity of the Aesir, of the Os, walking hunched over a bit in the windstorm, wearing his Gandalf hat, as he was known to do, in various of his guises. And you can kind of see his cloak or his beard flowing out behind him. So that's one way to visualize and help remember this rune. So again, we think of this rune as divine communication, as guidance, as inspiration. So when we see this rune in a casting, it means that those lines of communication are open, that the subject of the rune could be a character, a general scene, what have you, but that the force of inspiration, the forces of communication in general, of good news, however you want to take that this communication is free-flowing. It's being transmitted and received. This can be from the character. The character may be offering good advice or may be open to and receiving good advice. Reversed, naturally, it's going to be the opposite of that. And that can be taken in a couple of ways. That the character has shut out any potential to receive advice. They're just closed off and they're not listening. They're not having it. It could also be that the mentors or those who would offer their advice are being kept silent, either of their own will or for another cause. This could be abandonment. This could be prayers not being heard. This could be intercepted communications. If you're writing a spy thriller, for example, it could be a communique that's been set awry. It could be false information, false flag, double agent, things of that nature. So you see where this goes, and the more you get into this, the more you play around and meditate on the runes, and the more you do the rune castings and work on various interpretations, the more avenues will open up for you. And depending on your particular genre, depending on the nature of your story, you're going to find more and more ways for these to express. As I'm sitting here, I'm receiving Ansuz. I'm getting these different inspirations and interpretations. And, as we've talked about in other videos, I don't think this comes from my intellect. It may. I certainly have no qualms in accepting the strength of my intellect. That is not one of my faults by any means. But I don't think this is coming straight out of my mind. This is part of that creative storytelling process that I speak about, where we tap into that source of story. And the more you do this, again, in your own storytelling, I'm sure you've found this, as the deeper you get into your story, the more and more and more it flows. And that's exactly the same thing as we get into the runes. That's why this is such a powerful tool, is that the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And the more value you'll get out of it. I don't see this as a crutch by any means. I'm stuck, I got to go to the runes. I think you can use this daily if you like. And at the beginning of any writing period, that you can do a small casting just to, one, possibly to set the stage for what am I going to write today. But two, just as an exercise to connect, to get into that creative zone, to tap into the source of story. That's a really powerful thing. I've been looking at these runes for a long time, and I'd never really hit on that idea of Ansuz reversed being a dead drop that got missed somehow. So this is, I still find amazement in the runes, in the power of them to help me connect when I'm not even writing. So it's really fun and glorious stuff. So anyway, I digress. This is Ansuz, the God mouth, the divine inspiration. Upright communications, inspiration, lines of communication are open. Reversed, that communication has been cut off, or the message has been misinterpreted, has been twisted, or it's simply gone awry. That is Ansuz, the fourth rune of the first 8, and that will be it for this video. So again, my friends, fellow storytellers, I am Mark Graham with the Source of Story YouTube channel and Runes for Writers. Our Indiegogo campaign is still up and running as of this recording, so please check it out and see if this is something that you wish to support. I think there's a lot of value in getting this into the hands of people, so if we can get this production out and going, I would certainly appreciate your help. As I've stated before, I will do this with or without your assistance, but I would definitely appreciate your contributions. So, thanks for watching. Enjoy your studies with the runes. I hope you get as much out of this as I do, and I look forward to hearing your story with the runes.